This presentation is going to enable you to be prepared to get prepared for the first exam, and in fact the same advice applies to all the exams you'll be taking in this course. All of the exams will be taken in a testing center on one of our CF campuses. I've given you a link on Canvas in the previous page on the module to give you the information about where on our campuses the testing center is, what hours they are open, and that sort of information. When you show up for the exam to the testing center, you'll need to have an ID. Your student ID will work just fine. You will also need to provide a Scantron to take the exam. The Scantrons are available in the bookstore, and you can take them and you can purchase them in one of the bookstores on our various CF campuses. You'll also need to bring a pencil to take the exam with. So bring an ID with you, a Scantron and a pencil. All of the questions on the exam will meet one of these formatted questions. There'll be 100 questions on the exam. That sounds like an awful lot. It's really not an awful lot. These are very short, simple questions. Either you know the answer or you don't know the answer. You know, I could give you an exam with only one question on it, but I think you want an exam with lots of questions because that means you can miss more questions and it not really hurt you. All the questions will come in one of these formats. There'll be a multiple choice section on the exam. There will be a matching section on the exam. There will be a fill-in-the-blank section on at least the first exam, and that fill-in-the-blank section will deal with the Olympian gods. I gave you a chart of the Olympian gods, and you don't need to write all this down because you have that chart. I've given it to you on Canvas. But the fill-in-the-blank section will look an awful lot like this chart, where you just you will learn by rote the Greek names of the gods' Roman name, their responsibility, their symbols, and so on. If you memorize this chart, then that fill-in-the-blank section should be easy for you. So that is the fill-in-the-blank section on the exam. Now let's look at the term list, and you don't need to be writing these down because you've already have access to the term list. I hope most of you have already downloaded it and taken a look at it. It's on Canvas with everything else in this course. Up at the top you see the Olympians. The Olympians up here, their Greek and Latin names, their responsibilities and their symbols, and their characteristics. The Greek and Latin names, their responsibilities and symbols come right off of this chart that I've given you. And again, if you just learn straight from this chart, you will do very well on that fill-in-the-blank section that deals with the Olympians. And you'll also learn many of the answers to the multiple choice and matching sections as well. You also see here some other gods and monsters to know about. Most of these names refer back to, most of the names that you see up here in this section refer down to the three first heroes Gamos and the three pairings of the gods in them. The first pair, you already know this from the material that you've learned already. The first hero Gamos is Gaia, who marries her son Uranus. That marriage produces a number of children, one of them Cronus, who marries Rhea, in that second hero Gamos, and their most famous child is Zeus, who marries Hera in the third hero Gamos. Again, you don't need to be writing that down in your notes right now. You've already gotten it from the material that you've already learned. Now, if we back up a second to the format of the exam, there's a short answer section, and that will deal with the myths that I've listed for you right here. Okay, let's take this very quickly. Very simply, okay, you've got a myth. Okay, let's just take Arachne here. Arachne's a good myth. For each of these myths, you're going to be given a handful of these myths, and for each of these myths, you're going to be wanting to list the major players, the gods in particular. So let's take Arachne very slowly. Who are the major players in the myth of Arachne? Well, Arachne first. And then what god is involved primarily in the Arachne myth? Do you remember? Arachne is a weaver. She makes beautiful woven materials. And people say, you weave as beautifully as one of the gods does. Which of the gods? Athena. Do you remember? Athena. Athena is the Greek name for this god. Her Roman name is... What's Athena's Roman name? Minerva. Now we're back to that basic chart of the Olympians, right? So Arachne and Minerva, they're the major players. What's the basic plot? We're not talking about a long paragraph. We're talking about maybe 2 or 3 sentences. How would we give the basic plot line of Arachne? Athena becomes jealous of Arachne's weaving and challenges her to a contest. Arachne defeats Athena, and in retaliation, Athena turns Arachne into a spider. That's the basic plot. That's it. 2 sentences, maybe 3, maybe 4, depending on the myth. Now the function, especially the etiological function. What's the etiological function of the Arachne myth? It explains where spiders come from. You see? Here is Phaethon. Do you remember Phaethon, that myth? Okay. Phaethon, the basic plot is that Phaethon grows up thinking that one of the sun gods, Hyperion, is his father. He goes to Hyperion and asks, Hyperion, are you my father? Hyperion says, yeah, I guess I am. And Phaethon says, well, you need to do something for me. Hyperion says, what is it? Phaethon says, give me the keys to the chariot. Phaethon takes off in the chariot, goes too high over the North Pole and it freezes, goes too low over the Sahara Desert and it burns everything up. And so Zeus kills him with a thunderbolt. So we have the basic plot, who are the major players, Phaethon and Hyperion, and I guess Zeus too. The basic plot, you can boil down what I said into 2 or 3 sentences. And the function, especially an etiological function, it explains where the North Pole, why the North Pole has ice on it, and why the Sahara Desert is a desert. Okay. So for each of these, you need to go through and make sure you understand the basic plot line, the function of the myth, if there is one, and the major players in the myth. The rest of what you see are just terms that we went through in the material. You're familiar with the term etiological. That word explains why we do the things that we do, or why things are the way that they are. That could be something like the Callisto myth up here, which explains where the Big Bear and Little Bear, Ursa Major and Ursa Minor constellations come from in the sky. It explains why they never dip below the horizon. It might be a cultural etiology, like in the Trick at Mykone. Hey, Dad, how come we don't sacrifice the T-bones and the filet mignon and the good meat to Zeus? Oh, well, let me tell you, son, Prometheus played a trick on Mykone, and that this explains why we do the sacrifices in a particular way. And I can promise you each of the questions on the exam are related to the terms on this term list. So you want to go through your notes. We talked about true myth, legend, and folklore. We talked about this term primordial, which refers to all the way back at the start of everything, back to the time before time began, all the way back at the start of time. You learned this German word Weltanschauung, which means a way of looking at things, an outlook, a world of view. We went through Hesiod's ages of humankind. You remember they started off with the Gold Age and ends with the Iron Age. You may remember, I hope you do, because I asked you a discussion question on purpose to prepare you for the exam, that in the Bronze Age, humankind kills off itself and has to be recreated afterwards. So take a look at this term list, go through it, make sure you know what each of these terms mean. Take a several good hard looks at that chart of the Olympians. Learn each of the Greek names, the Roman names, the responsibilities, the symbols, and you're going to do fine on the exam. If you have any question about the exam, make sure you send me a message through the Canvas messaging system, and I will get back to you within moments of my seeing your message. Good luck with it. I really want you to do well.